Hello and welcome to another episode of the De-Stress podcast with me, Dr. Amanda. This podcast is all about raising awareness of the impacts of stress on our life and our health. In this podcast, we try to give you practical tips about managing stress and highlight the importance of it because it's often underestimated. So today's podcast, I have a very special guest with me. I have my husband, Raph Chisholm, and the reason he's on the podcast today is because we wanted to talk about marriage. When it comes to relationships, it's quite integral when it comes to stress management. Often our relationships can cause us stress, but also when it comes to stress management, having positive relationships are really important. And one of our biggest relationships that a lot of us get into is a marriage. And so I will welcome now my husband. I'll let him introduce himself, but that is what we're going to be exploring today. There are so many different areas when it comes to marriage and causing stress, but today we want to talk about introducing children into the marriage and how that can really start to rock the boat. Okay, so hi, this is my husband, this is Raph. Say hi to the people.
Wagwan.
So, a bit about us. Well, actually, you know what? Introduce yourself. How would you like to introduce yourself to the podcast?
So I'm Amanda's husband. I am father of two. I'm a teacher. I am a self-proclaimed comedian and athlete. Mm-hmm. And because I guess I'm on the De-Stress podcast, I would classify myself also as a anti-worrier.
Definitely. When it comes to stress and stress management and keeping yourself in a more worry-free state of mind, this man here is an expert in that. Just so good at it. But and he's taught me a lot in terms of managing stress. But today we are talking about marriage. And we've been married for nearly 8 years this year. We've been together for 11 years. We met when I was 19 and he was 23. We got married when I was 23 and he was 27. And we're now both in our 30s. And so we have navigated a lot of life together. There's been a lot of transitions. But I would say that one of the transitions that caused quite a bit of stress for us, a lot of joy as well, and actually brought us closer, but a lot of stress nonetheless, was introducing children into our lives. Yeah? So tell them about our kids.
So I'm a girl dad. I've got two girls. One is 3, going on and then another one is
going on 30. I don't know what she's going on crazy.
13. Yeah, should be over in it.
Yeah,
so
13.
Mood swings and all that. And then the other one is 11 months, almost 1. Some really good personality traits. They're both clearly here for a really good time.
For a great time.
They have zero chill.
We do not have relaxed, quiet children by any stretch of the imagination.
But I am realising that the oldest one, the bigger terror, is she's a really sweet kid.
Yeah.
She's really, really nice. It's just making sure that she's facilitated.
Facilitated. Oh, okay then. But parenthood in itself will come with its own stresses, and there'll be other episodes that we're talking about parenting children and navigating that at the different stages. But this episode, I wanted to talk about introducing the children into our lives.
Introducing them.
Yeah. So when the kids first come, because it's just a massive shift, and I think for most people, no matter how perfectly you do it, it's still a stressful period of time.
Yeah. Well, if someone has said that raising children has been zero stress, that's because they've paid for a lot of help.
I feel like even if you have a lot of help, it still can cause a lot of stress. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So like you said, we have a 3-year-old. So it was 4 years ago that we started trying to have children, and we got pregnant, or I got pregnant. And I think that's where the journey should really start, in that whole process of trying to have a kid and everything. But I have a few questions that I want to answer in this podcast. And I guess the first thing really is, why is it so stressful having children or introducing kids into the family? What do you think? Like, why is that period of time so stressful?
Because you're making a transition from being selfish to selfless.
And not negatively selfish.
Yeah, but you can choose yourself. You can choose to spend all your money on silly things. Like, let's say, for example, I don't know, Amanda might have a Nike addiction or something like that, and she might decide that any opportunity she has to spend it on Nike and go out and do something like that, she can. Because
he's talking about himself right now.
We're speaking hypothetically.
When he says Amanda, he means Raph has a Nike addiction. But yeah, carry on.
Yeah, we're speaking hypothetically. But let's say you want to sacrifice going out and spending money elsewhere, like something social, for example, because you can do that, because you're only the only person that takes a hit.
Yeah.
So you are being selfish in that respect. So again, not being like it's all about me, but you only have to think about, well, I've been really irresponsible here. Now I'm gonna have to eat bread and toast. I'm gonna have to eat toast for the next 2 days. You can't do that when you've got children, because you need to make sure that they've got the best. Or you might think, I really want to go on holiday. The type of holidays that you take. All of a sudden you got to start thinking about, oh, well, actually, is it child friendly? Instead of being like, I want to stay somewhere that is adult only.
Yeah. And that's the thing, in marriage, you do have to become more selfless than when you're just single, because you're having to consider somebody else, but you're considering somebody else who is also considering you, and you're also considering somebody else who can look after themselves. Whereas when it comes to children, you're having to consider somebody else that, first of all, they don't consider you. It's not, they're not at that developmental stage. And also they can't look after themselves, like they are dependent on you. Whereas in a marriage, there isn't that dependence, there's that teamwork, and you make those sacrifices, or you become more selfless and considerate of each other's feelings and wants and everything. But really, like, you look after yourself, like you can look after yourself. We do look after each other, but like, you don't need me to help you go to sleep at night. You don't need me to, make sure that you're eating. I know that we help each other in these ways. Like, we cook for each other and all that stuff, and we try and help each other stay accountable to our goals. But really, I don't need to wash you. I don't need to feed you from my bosom. You don't change my body. Like, it's those things.
We're both sustainable. Another reason why it's very stressful to raise kids, especially when at the age where you are introducing them to the family, they are the most selfish and the most manipulative and the most self-centered people. Like, the world does revolve around them. Yeah,
their world, they are the centre of their world, and rightly so. That's
why it's stressful, and that's obviously going from being selfish to completely selfless, and putting not only the child's needs before yours. In my from my perspective, I'm putting your needs before mine as well, because
I am more dependent.
You're the primary caregiver, aren't you? And then I'm just there trying to be in a video.
Yeah, no, I would say we're both the primary caregivers, but as in, I'm the one,
the other one that's like
pushing them out, breastfeeding them, and I'm at home with them more as well. And because of that,
they have that attachment to you and all that kind of stuff.
And I think what else makes it stressful as well, in terms of why it's stressing the marriage, is because, like we said, you're now having to become more selfless for these individuals. But before that, the only person you really had to care about, and obviously there's lots of people in your family or friends that you might care about, but really for day-to-day runnings of your household, it was just about the two of you, and you have a lot of time to give to your partner. Yeah, there's just like, you have a lot of time where you're just the two of you. You have much more opportunities to communicate with each other, to cater to each other's needs, to make each other feel like they're loved. Whereas when a child comes along, they take up so much time. I always think one of the key pillars when it comes to marriage and relationships is communication. And I think it becomes very hard to communicate effectively when you are sleep deprived, when you have lots of hormones raging through your body, in my case. And when you are completely shifting the way in which you do things, it becomes difficult to communicate. And when there isn't that communication there, it can start to build misinterpretation of things, resentment, and you can kind of get lost in the roles of parenthood and forget the roles of marriage and wife and husband.
Yeah. Is obviously said a hormone imbalance.
Or shift.
Yeah, shift. Sorry, but is it cortisol? Is that a hormone?
Yeah, so that's a hormone involved in the stress response.
So that would be for both of us then. Yeah. So not just.
No, yeah. So it's not just hormone changes in myself, but also we're both sleep deprived, and we know that when you're not getting enough sleep, it does affect the homeostasis in your body. It affects the hormone balancings in the body, and also some of the things that we did to care for ourselves in terms of getting enough exercise, eating well, sleeping well, all those things get disrupted because you are now creating a new life.
Yeah, you lose your coping mechanisms.
Yeah, and you get them back, but in the moment when it's first happening, it's very hard. There has to be that transition from being Amanda and Raph, husband and wife, man and woman, to mom and dad. Yeah, to parents. Should we tell a bit of our story about when the girls came along, how it affected us, our marriage?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry guys if you can hear background noise. One of our children has woken up from a nap, crying. I don't know if it's picking it up, but anyway. So yeah, we had our first child at the end of 2019, and so I fell pregnant about March, April time, 2019. And before that, trying to get pregnant.
You say trying, I don't really feel like there was much effort.
Yeah, we were very fortunate, very blessed to get pregnant quite quickly. But I would say there was even stress with that. I was very, at the time, ready to have children. I was ready to be pregnant. Yeah. And so I think I added stress to that in terms of expectations and come on and we need to have this kid.
Yeah.
I don't know how you dealt with that, but it wasn't very drawn out. I mean, it was maybe a month.
Yeah, it was I'm not a machine, innit? No, yeah, you're right. It's because of the expectation and the desire to have something. That's where the added stress came on. Obviously, you're trying to meet ovulation windows and all that kind of stuff, whereas before that was never a factor.
Yeah.
So yeah, the trying element of it is easy because it's something that you've been practicing your whole marriage. It shouldn't really change, but obviously because you're being proactive or you're trying to be purposeful about what you're trying to achieve, that's, I guess, yeah. So that did make it a little bit.
It made it a little bit stressful, but it was quite short-lived for us.
Yes, it was.
And that first pregnancy, I would say for myself in terms of the pregnancy, there were some elements of it that were stressful. Just make sure the well-being of the child, the well-being of myself. I had a bit of anxiety in the beginning of the pregnancy, but I felt like we were still pretty good because life hadn't changed yet. We were preparing for the change, and yes, there was tiredness and cravings and all of that stuff in the preparation, buying the things. But really, I didn't think it was that massive of a stressful time for our marriage. No,
definitely not for me, personally.
No, you put cots together and got prams, and we had baby moon, and yeah, I think the first pregnancy wasn't a massive stress.
No, it was calm.
For the marriage, yeah.
Yeah, routines weren't really changed.
No. If anything, you probably had a bit more time to yourself because I slept more.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, but so that was fine. But then we come to introducing our eldest, Isabella, and I want to hear your perspective. How did you find that transition in terms of our marriage and the stress that it put on us?
Difficult, isn't it? From where I was standing, obviously the timeshare of Amanda has gone from I guess I share you with work and other people, but I still had a majority share in that. I am no longer a majority shareholder.
No.
So I guess that's difficult. The time that Amanda does have that isn't spent on babies is then spent recovering. So yeah, it's like you have to be mature enough and humble enough to realise when it's your time and how you can utilise that time. It's not easy, and obviously I know this now after 2 kids, so I guess it probably was quite, I don't want to say it was like, it's not like it was hard to take, but it's not that enjoyable.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like a weird, I don't know if the word's paradox, but you know, on the one hand, we are actually bonding so much over this child that's doing all these amazing things and like rolling over and, you know, showing us love and crawling and just doing things like we've created a human together. And the way that you supported me during the birth, like all of that, you know, really helped to bring us together. But then equally, we're not getting as much time, just the two of us. We're not communicating as well, and I am exhausted.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's not, we didn't spend time together the same as we were before.
Yeah, we were
not
together.
Quite.
We were together, but
not, well, obviously one of my loves is watching TV or films. You still fell asleep during films like you did before, so I guess that hadn't changed. But yeah, things definitely
switched a
yeah.
little bit, yeah. And
I felt like I had more of a caring role for you, which I guess would have added more stress.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. I think it's also the timing too. I was actually getting to the point where I was getting quite lonely, especially in those first few months. Just dealing with it all, like the transition to becoming a mother, I found myself very tearful, anxious, not really knowing if I was doing the right thing. And it was as the pandemic was coming, the pandemic hit in like when Isabella was 3 months old, and so then we were locked down. And this is the thing as well, the transition to becoming a mother, I think is sometimes a bit easier or a bit more natural, innate for women than it is for men to transition into being a father. And I say that because we grow the child, we like, that bond is there. If you become a mother via pregnancy, like, you know, birthing your own child, then that hormonal shift, your body is literally preparing for motherhood. Right, as your body prepares to produce milk, that's all happening and it's changing the connections in your brain. And then once they're there, you know, you're with them. So, like the hormone shifts after giving birth, during birth, after giving birth, when you are changing them and feeding them and all of those responsibilities that you have, and your body's recovering from it. It's like as your body recovers from birth, it also builds itself up as a mom. And especially if a lot of the time in society, it's quite common the mother is the primary caregiver, and in our situation that was the case as well. Like I took the time off work and I was home with her more, I was doing more of the caring. For you, it's a longer transition, I think, because you don't have those big impacts of like, you know, this is shifting, your hormones are shifting, your body's shifting, you know, that doesn't quite happen. And I think sometimes there can be that lag behind that. As a mum, you're there, you know what's happening, you know the change that happened with the baby, you got into your routine of doing your thing. Whereas the dad, in our situation, you were going out to work, coming back, you weren't at home with us all the time. Babies change so quickly, and sometimes you were lagging behind things. And so I remember like the pandemic happening, and I'm doing stuff and you're doing things incorrectly because I don't think you're doing it right that way, and I want you to do it this way. You're like, but last week that was okay. Do you know what I mean? There's just like, I was more immersed into it than you were. And so I did start to build up some resentment as well to you, feeling that, you know, I'm doing everything. Like, when is he going to catch on to this father thing? And it's not that you weren't present, like you were very present and very supportive, but I just felt like, okay, I'm caught up in it. I'm caught up, I'm in the mum role, like what's going on? Come on, catch up.
Yeah, I definitely remember that resentment. It was stuff like, well, you've been at work all day having a great time, And I'm here looking after
talking to adults.
And it's like, yeah, work ain't fun like that. But I completely obviously understand.
And like now that I've gone back to work since having Isabella, sometimes when I'm at work, sometimes it is a bit of a
yeah. But
you're not in it's not like you're just having a jolly, but that's how it felt sometimes.
Yeah, it's like hang on a sec. I'm waking up mad early. I'm going to work, putting in a big shift, massive effort, and then I come home, trying as much as I can. Obviously, not that effective, or I didn't feel like I was that effective. But where I would, especially with Izzy, is I'd be up until like 11, 12 with her, having a sleep with me, chill with me, so that you could get some rest. And then I'm doing it all again the next day, getting up for work really early. So the stress came there for me, because I'm like, well, I'm doing everything that I can do. Which isn't much, but it's like, okay, but I need more. It's like, okay, I'm not really too sure how much more I can give or where, because I am obviously trying to hold it down.
And that's because that's the transition, because now you do way more than that. You're used to having late nights and early mornings and kids wake up in the night, and yes, we're tired, but we're adjusted to it much more than those early days with that first kid. It was so tough. And not to say things aren't tough now, because but I feel like you adjust to it, you adjust to the role of parent, and that like, yes, your mornings aren't what they were, and your evenings aren't what they were, and sometimes you're up late, and sometimes you got to juggle this and this. But when you first start doing it, it just feels like all consuming.
I think one thing that made it easier though, for us, or for me, essentially we had like a crash course in parenting because of the lockdown. So we were just at home constantly.
All the time. But still, even with that, we got to about when Isabella was about 11 months into being parents, and we had to go to marriage counselling. Well, we didn't have to, we chose to go to marriage counselling because of all of that resentment and just we weren't aligned. Before that, we've always been very, together on the same page with everything, I felt like. But I felt like that was the first time where we felt like we were on different pages and that we weren't giving to each other what we needed to give to each other. And so we went to counselling. We did about 5 sessions, I think. Do you remember?
I don't remember how many.
Yeah, I think it was like 5 or 6 sessions. I think that just really helped us to get back onto the same page, because I think we were just completely off. And I can't remember who it is. It's either Michelle Obama or Oprah. They have this thing, I said it before, it's an analogy where you've got a car and the car looks great. Yeah, you think it's all good. And this is what they do when they manufacture cars. Then they put it on, before they say the car is ready to go, they put it on a platform and they shake it. And then if there's anything loose or wrong, that will all become evident. And so, although I would say that we had an excellent marriage before the children, like I felt like we had a good marriage, we had a lot of fun together and we were very connected. Still, going into parenthood puts you on that platform and it shakes your marriage. And even though the car looked really good, it showed all the bits that were loose.
Good.
And that's why, do you know what I mean? And that's why I feel like even though we had a good relationship beforehand, there were still loose bits, and parenthood shook it about and it showed us those loose things.
So then you go back, you tighten up the bits that fell off.
Yeah.
And then before you put out the next version,
you have another baby.
And that shakes it again. And you see
and you see where things are. And so I guess we're in the shaking time now because we've introduced another child, Athena. And if you watched the first episode, I told you my story of stress, how I came to, like my story where I had like heightened stress and burnout, and how I ended up coming up with this podcast and why we're all here at the moment. And I had a very stressful pregnancy, not because of the pregnancy, but because of external factors. But even though those external factors may have made me stressed, ultimately it puts strain on the marriage as well. Yeah. And I think very similar things to what happened with Isabella has happened this time, apart from there's been a bit more pressures in terms of, with marriage, you're doing life together, and so whatever's happening in life, it impacts everything. And so this time round, there's been pressures in terms of me recovering, not just from pregnancy and birth, but from burnout and anxiety and depression. There's been recovering our finances from the impacts of everything that happened with work, getting confidence back, and just there's been a lot of transitions this time. But we are still married. Are we happy? Yeah. We're still married. And so that's a bit of our story with stress. and how it manifested with when we had our children. But like I said, we are still married, we are still happy. And so I guess like the next question that I have, or the last question, is how do you actually manage that transition? Because it's really hard to avoid it. And this podcast isn't about how to avoid stress, it's about how to navigate stress, manage stress, and still thrive through the stressful situations that happen in life that are inevitable to happen. And so I've got a few things that I think we did that really helped us to navigate that transition. But do you want me to go first with one, or have you got anything that's come to mind?
Because I'm not really. I obviously, my issue personally is that I'm not able to. I find it more difficult to realize what the coping mechanism is. So if you can show me, just because
what we do, okay.
I just roll the punches in it, so that's why I find it harder to.
Okay. Yeah. So I think one of the things that we did really well was our preparation for having kids. I think people often say that you can't prepare to have kids, you have kids and you'll never be prepared to have kids. True, but there are some things that you can do to make yourself a bit more ready. And I think we really invested in our marriage beforehand. Now, obviously, not everyone has the luxury of having like a long relationship before they have kids, but we've been together 7 years before we had our first child. We've been married for 4 years, we've been dating 3 years before that. And so we really had taken time to cultivate our relationship and have the foundation there, and make sure that we were friends and we had fun beforehand. Because I think when you're having those, and really get to know each other properly, because I think when you're having those times where you're really struggling, having those memories and having that foundation to fall back on, that this person, what your relationship is, we're just going through a tough time. I think that helps put perspective to it. Whereas when I think, if you rush into having kids, or not even time frame really, but say you have kids with a partner that you don't know that well, or, you haven't really spent that time to cultivate your relationship, to adventure together and have fun together, then the stresses come and your foundation work, like, where is it? So I think that helped. Yeah. Another thing that I think really helped us as well was what's helping us this time is using our village much more. So last time, like we said, it was lockdown, and although we do have like family around, things were quite different last time. And so in terms of us using our village or using additional help, I guess that's where the counselling came in for us. But this time round, I think we, because of all the stress, I brought my mother-in-law over. She's been staying with us for the last 4 months. And what that's allowed us to do for our marriage is that we've been able to have time, just the two of us together, like intentionally make that time. We've had a couple of nights away, which we never did with Isabella. And
it was the first night away on anniversary.
Yeah, so with Isabella, the first time we spent a night away from her, we had 1 night away for our anniversary. We weren't even gone for 24 hours.
We crammed a lot in.
We did a lot. Yeah. But those times, I think having time, setting time intentionally for just you and your partner to do things that aren't serious, not time together for you to do the budget, or time together for you to set the meal plans, or whatever, or for you to clean the house together, but like setting time together where you're just having fun and kind of a bit of nostalgia, doing things that you used to do before the kids, or doing things just without the kids. Doesn't mean you don't talk about the kids, we always talk about the kids, but like having time for the two of us.
I've thought of one.
Go on.
So I think one thing that definitely reduced stress during the transition period was making sure that, like, when we picked our house years before, we made sure that we future-proofed. So we're talking about how many kids might we have, so much space might we need.
Yeah.
So instead of putting ourselves through pregnancy and having to move or trying to find a new house, we bought a house that we'd be able to grow into. We made sure that the cars would have enough space. I had actually moved closer to home in terms of work, which also then obviously shut down the commute time and all that kind of stuff, or reduce the time, not shut it down rather. So doing things like that is preparing you obviously for having the kids, but reducing the the stress of things that could potentially come in the way.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely helped to manage. Just removing that potential stress.
That's true. That is really true. I know that not everyone has the luxury of doing that, but if you are planning kids, that's something you can do. And something else, I think everyone says communication is so important in marriage, but I think something that I've learnt this time round compared to the first time I had kids was to communicate your entire thought. Now, communication I could do so much better at, I'm sure you would agree, but communicating the entire thought, so like rather than just saying something quite passive aggressively, or that you don't like this, or not communicate everything. Say into your partner that, okay, I think now I talk quite a bit, and I'll be like, well, I'm feeling at capacity because of this and this, and like these are all the things that are happening in my mind right now, so that you're aware of it. And sometimes I may not make you aware of it early enough, but I think communicating the whole thought and a lot of the time where I find myself not telling the truth or not communicating like my entire thoughts to you was because I was either, and I think you as well, why you don't communicate with me sometimes, is fearful about the reaction, and also fearful, about like how it might be interpreted or whatever. But I think you've got to give your partner the opportunity to deal with the truth and move forward, and understand that the reaction in the moment may not be perfect, but it might change how you are dealing with the marriage going forward, and actually giving each other what you need. So yeah, communicating the whole thought, not just like the annoyance or the resentment, but communicating like why you're feeling so annoyed right now. Is it because actually you feel like the last few weeks there hasn't been much time spent together with the family? Is it because you're feeling uncared for? Is it because you're feeling unheard? Like communicating the whole thing. And something actually in terms of like we're married, we have arguments. Our last argument was about misinterpretation of something. So something happened, and I thought that Raph was not defending me, or basically we both interpreted the situation completely differently. And I felt like you should have protected me, and you felt like the situation wasn't a threatening situation. And so we just completely misinterpreted each other. And there's something I want to do going forward, and something I heard in another podcast actually, is you got annoyed at the fact that I misinterpreted because I know your character, and I know that you always want to protect me. And so even though how I felt is valid, I should have also given you the benefit of the doubt that he didn't do this, but it's not because his intention was this. I need to think about your intention based on your character. Does that make sense?
That does make a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah, and so giving your partner that grace, that you know them, you know that they love you, and you know that their intention is never to harm you. That isn't their intention. And so even though sometimes things do harm you or hurt you, when you go and communicate that, as you should, and say how it made you feel, don't go and question their character, but give them the benefit of the doubt of that, give them the grace of that.
Yeah, I was saying this the other day, innit? I said that we both need to remember that no matter what it is that we do, we should know that the intention is never to harm the other person. Like always, it's never going to be that, because why? Like
and if that is the intention, you need to definitely go and work on the marriage.
Yeah, there's a problem in it. But like every action that we both take towards each other is always going to be a positive one, and out of love, and trying to make something easier and harder. And that's something that is hard to remember sometimes. But yeah, the intentionality and character. Yeah, that's a good one actually.
Yeah. I only heard that yesterday on a podcast. I was like, yes, that is what we need to take forward, because that's my issue sometimes. But I really hope that you did enjoy this podcast. Another episode of De-Stress with Dr. Amanda in the bag. It's a bit different because we were talking more about our own personal experiences, and this wasn't from a place of being experts. We're not marriage experts, but just what's helped us and what we've navigated with. And hopefully some of you got some benefit from that or resonated with it. But next week there will be another episode, so please stay tuned. If you haven't already, please subscribe and rate and review this podcast. It really helps more people to see it and get the valuable knowledge. Thank you, Raph, for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me today.
Oh, cute. Are you going to come back again?
Yes. But just so you're aware, today's price will not be tomorrow's price.
And on that note, yes, please, you can also follow us, or you can follow me as well on Life with Dr. Amanda on both Instagram and YouTube. If you're listening to this podcast, you can find it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you're watching this, sorry, I said that wrong. If you are watching this podcast on YouTube, you can find this to listen to on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you are listening to this podcast, you can also watch it and see our beautiful faces over on YouTube. But your beautiful face as well. But yes, if you have any more topics that you want us to discuss, don't forget to either write a comment down below, send me a DM, send me an email, and I look forward to hearing from you. Take care.